She was moments away from sealing the deal of a lifetime. But in the hospital lobby, one shocking moment stopped everything. A child whispered a secret to a powerful man. Security closed in. And that's when a quiet single dad stepped forward, his army tattoo catching the CEO's eye. In that instant, she walked away from millions and followed him into the unknown. What she uncovered outside wasn't just one family's hidden struggle. It was a buried truth, powerful enough to shatter reputations, destroy fortunes, and rewrite lives forever. But can compassion really survive when lies, money, and power are on the line? Or will following her heart cost her everything? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Marian Alvarez's heels clicked against the polished hospital floor as she hurried through the lobby of North Star Health. Her tailored navy suit and pearl earrings projected the confidence she needed for the morning's crucial meeting. Inside, her stomach churned with nervous energy. $50 million. The partnership would transform North Star's ability to serve their community. Every second counted now. She glanced at her watch. 8:55 a.m. Miss Alvarez. Her assistant waved frantically from across the lobby. The pharma executives are already upstairs. Marian nodded, quickening her pace. The morning sunlight streamed through the lobby's glass walls, catching the brass lettering that spelled out North Star Health's mission statement. Healing with heart. She allowed herself a small smile, despite her rush. After 15 years of climbing from administrator to CEO, this deal would secure her legacy of compassionate care. A commotion near the security desk caught her attention. A young woman in housekeeping scrubs was fumbling with paperwork while her small son fidgeted beside her. "Ma'am, this isn't the right entrance for staff," the security guard said firmly. "You'll need to—" The boy slipped away from his mother's grasp. "Nico!" she called out, panic rising in her voice. "Come back!" Marian's steps slowed as she watched the child, no more than 6 years old, padding across the lobby's marble floor. His untied shoelaces threatened to trip him with each step. Through the rotating doors came Victor Harrington, the hospital's board chair, speaking with his ever-present PR assistant. His silver hair gleamed under the lobby lights, his presence commanding attention as always. The boy made a beeline for Victor. Something about his determined little face made Marian pause completely. "Mr. Harrington," the PR assistant was saying, "about the press release." Tiny fingers caught the edge of Victor's expensive suit jacket. The boy looked up, dark eyes wide with both fear and certainty. "Mommy says you're my daddy," he whispered. The words seemed to freeze the air in the lobby. Phones clattered to the floor. The PR assistant's tablet slipped from her hands. Victor's face drained of color. What did you say? Please, no." The boy's mother rushed forward, her cleaning cart forgotten. "Nico, come here." Security guards moved in, their heavy footsteps echoing. One reached for Nico's shoulder. "Step back from Mr. Harrington," he ordered. That's when Marian saw him. A tall black man in simple work clothes stepping between the guards and the boy. His movements were precise, controlled. He raised his open palm in a gesture that was both peaceful and unmistakably protective. "Let's all take a breath," he said, his voice steady and low. "The child isn't a threat." The man knelt beside Nico, placing himself at eye level. "Hey, buddy," he said softly. "You're safe. No one's going to hurt you." Marian found herself moving closer, drawn by the gentle authority in his voice. As he shifted, she caught sight of the tattoo on his forearm, the distinctive insignia of an Army combat medic. The design was partially hidden by his rolled sleeve, but she recognized it instantly. Something in her chest tightened. This wasn't just some random bystander. The careful way he positioned himself, the instinct to protect while de-escalating, this was someone who'd seen real crisis. Phones were out now, recording. Victor's PR assistant was frantically whispering into her phone. The boy's mother stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. Marian's own phone buzzed, probably the pharma executives wondering where she was. The $50 million deal that could change everything for North Star Health hung in the balance. But as she watched the former medic shelter both mother and child from the growing chaos, something shifted in her perspective. The deal suddenly felt distant compared to the human drama unfolding before her. She reached up and removed her earpiece, letting it dangle from its cord. The motion caught Victor's attention. "Marion," he said sharply. "Shouldn't you be heading to the meeting?" She met his gaze steadily. "No, Victor, I shouldn't." Marion pulled out her phone and dialed her assistant's number. "Cancel the partnership meeting," she said clearly. "Tell them something urgent has come up." "But, Miss Alvarez, cancel it." She ended the call and slipped the phone into her pocket. Looking at the small group, the trembling mother, the brave little boy, and the steady presence of the veteran, Marion made her decision. She walked over to them, positioning herself between them and the growing crowd of onlookers. "Follow me," she said quietly. "Let's take this somewhere private." She gestured toward the side door, leading to the hospital's courtyard. The former medic studied her face, clearly weighing whether to trust her. She met his gaze directly, letting him see her sincerity. Finally, he nodded. "Come on, buddy," he said to Nico, keeping his voice warm and steady. "Let's get some fresh air with your mom." As they moved toward the door, Marion heard Victor's sharp intake of breath behind her. She didn't turn around. Whatever consequences came from this choice, she would face them later. Right now, these people needed protection from the circus this was becoming. They needed someone to see them as human beings, not a scandal. The morning sun still streamed through the lobby's windows, catching the brass letters of North Star's mission statement, "Healing with Heart." Marion straightened her shoulders and followed the small group toward the courtyard door. Sometimes, she reflected, healing meant making choices that risk everything you've built. But as she watched the veteran guide mother and child to safety, she knew in her bones this was the right call. The morning sun beat down on the hospital's courtyard as Marion guided the small group away from prying eyes. Camera phones flashed through the lobby windows behind them, but here, among the carefully tended flower beds and benches, they found a moment of peace. Nico clung to Jenny's legs, his small fingers twisted in the fabric of her blue housekeeping uniform. Jenny's shoulders trembled as she tried to comfort him, whispering soft words in Filipino. Dark circles under her eyes spoke of sleepless nights and worry. Caleb Brooks stood slightly apart from them, his broad shoulders squared but his stance relaxed. His deep brown eyes scanned their surroundings with the practiced ease of someone used to assessing situations quickly. The Army medic tattoo on his forearm caught the sunlight as he shifted his weight. "Ma'am," he said quietly, extending his hand to Marion. "Caleb Brooks. I'm sorry for stepping in back there, but I couldn't stand by when I saw security surrounding them like that." Marion shook his hand, noting his firm but gentle grip. "Please, call me Marion, and don't apologize. You did exactly the right thing." She turned to Jenny, who seemed to shrink under her gaze. "Tell me what happened." Jenny's voice quavered. "I was just dropping off my updated paperwork at HR Nico." He saw Mr. Harrington and ran. She pressed her lips together, fighting tears. "Security surrounded us so fast, they wouldn't listen. They treated them like criminals," Caleb added, his calm voice carrying an edge of steel. "The boy was scared. Anyone could see that." Marion nodded, her heart heavy. She'd seen too many similar situations in her years of healthcare administration. The powerful steamrolling over the vulnerable. "Not this time. Not in her hospital. I was just trying to keep them safe," Caleb continued. His eyes grew distant for a moment. "Like that mass casualty drill at the VA years back? Your husband was there. James, right?" Marion's breath caught in her throat. "You knew James?" "Yes, ma'am. He was the social worker running point that day. I was treating victims in the simulation." A small smile touched Caleb's lips. "He kept stopping to pray with people, even though it was just a drill. Said it helped keep things human. I remember his wedding band. He'd tap it when he prayed." Tears pricked at Marion's eyes. That was James, exactly. Always finding ways to bring comfort, even in practice scenarios. "He died 2 years ago," she said softly. "Heart attack." "I'm sorry," Caleb said, and she could hear the genuine empathy in his voice. "He was a good man." Nico peeked out from behind his mother's legs, his dark eyes wide and uncertain. Caleb knelt down to the boy's level, his movements slow and deliberate. "Hey, buddy, you doing okay?" The boy nodded slightly, then buried his face against Jenny's uniform again. Jenny stroked his hair, her hands still trembling. "Ms. Alvarez," Jenny started, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant to cause trouble, but Nico, he needs to know his father. I've tried for years to talk to Mr. Harrington privately." "This isn't your fault," Marion said firmly. She reached out and touched Jenny's arm gently. "And you're not alone anymore. I'm going to find you a private space where you can feel safe, away from all this chaos." She gestured toward the lobby, where curious onlookers still pressed against the windows. "You have my word. I'll personally make sure you and Nico are protected." Relief flooded Jenny's face, though fear still lingered in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." Caleb straightened up, adjusting his jacket. "I can stay with them if you need me to," he offered. "Until things settle down." Marion studied him, this steady, compassionate veteran who'd treated her husband and now stood ready to protect a stranger and her child. His presence seemed to calm both Jenny and Nico, and she found herself grateful for his unexpected intervention in the lobby. "That would be helpful, thank you." She pulled out her phone and quickly typed out a message. "I'm having my assistant clear the conference room in the East Wing. It's private, away from the main areas." She looked at Jenny. "Would that be all right?" Jenny nodded, drawing Nico closer. "Yes, thank you." Marion watched as Caleb naturally took up a protective position beside them, his calm authority creating a buffer between the small family and the world. The connection to James felt like a sign, a reminder that sometimes the right people appear exactly when they're needed most. "Follow me," she said, leading them toward a side entrance. "Let's get you somewhere safe." Evelyn Cho paced the executive floor's gleaming hallway, her heels clicking against the polished tiles. Her phone buzzed for the 5th time in 10 minutes. Another angry message from the pharmaceutical representatives wondering why Northstar's CEO had abruptly canceled their meeting. "Yes, I understand your concerns," she said into her earpiece, trying to keep her voice steady. "Mrs. Alvarez had an urgent situation to attend to. We'll reschedule as soon as possible." She winced at the sharp response before ending the call. The elevator dinged, and Marion stepped out, her usually pristine appearance showing signs of strain. Her dark hair had escaped its neat bun, and her blazer was slightly wrinkled from the morning's chaos. "Marion!" Evelyn hurried toward her. "The pharma team is furious. We've been working on this partnership for months. $50 million. Gone, just like that?" She held up her phone, displaying a string of increasingly angry messages. Marion walked past her into the executive suite, sinking into one of the leather chairs. "I had no choice, Evelyn. You didn't see what happened down there." "I heard." Evelyn closed the door behind them. "The housekeeper's son caused a scene with Victor Harrington, but surely security could have handled it." "Handled it?" Marion's voice sharpened. "By dragging away a frightened child and his mother? By letting them become tabloid fodder?" Evelyn sat across from her, clasping her hands tightly. "Look, I understand you want to help. But Victor Harrington isn't just any board member. He practically owns this hospital. His family's donations built 3 wings. He controls the votes we need for the expansion, and that gives him the right to terrorize our staff?" Marion's eyes flashed. "Of course not." Evelyn softened her tone. "But we have to be strategic. This partnership would fund care for thousands of low-income seniors. New equipment, more staff, better facilities. All of it depends on this deal." Marion stood and walked to her office window, looking out over the city sprawling below. "Jenny Santos has worked here for 5 years, never missed a day, never caused trouble, and now, when she finally speaks up, Victor will demand disciplinary action," Evelyn warned. "He'll say she disrupted hospital operations, created a public relations nightmare. His lawyers will bury her." "Not if I can help it, Marion." Evelyn's voice grew urgent. "Listen to me. Victor chairs the board's executive committee. If you challenge him on this, he won't just kill the pharma deal, he'll move to replace you." "You think I don't know that?" Marion turned back to face her CFO. "But some things matter more than keeping my job." "Like what? Throwing away everything you've built here? The community programs, the charity care, the medical research, all of it could disappear if Victor decides to clean house." Marion walked to her desk, where a simple silver frame held a faded photograph. In it, a younger woman in a maid's uniform smiled proudly at the camera, her arms around a teenage girl in a graduation gown. The girl's face shone with determination and hope. Marion, decades ago, standing beside her mother. She picked up the frame, running her finger along its edge. My mother was a housekeeper, too. She worked in homes just like Victor's, serving people just like him. When things happened, she was told to stay quiet, to be grateful for her job, to remember her place. Evelyn's expression softened. I didn't know. She taught me that dignity isn't something others can give or take away. It's something you claim for yourself. Marion set the photo down carefully. I won't let another mother be silenced. Not in my hospital. The board meets next week, Evelyn said quietly. Victor will expect you to contain this situation before then. He'll want Jenny gone, the story buried. Then he's going to be very disappointed. Marion smoothed her blazer and began rebinding her hair. Draft a memo to legal and HR. I want protective measures in place for Jenny and her son by end of day, and get me everything we have on paternity testing protocols. Marion, please. Evelyn stood, her voice tight with concern. Think about what you're risking. Your career, the hospital's future, all for one housekeeper? No. Marion met her CFO's worried gaze. For every housekeeper, every worker who's been told to stay small, stay quiet, stay invisible, my mother fought so I could stand here today. I won't dishonor that by looking the other way. She turned back to the photograph of her mother, standing proud in her uniform. The woman who had scrubbed floors and served meals so her daughter could wear a CEO's badge, who had taught her that true leadership meant protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. The phone on her desk buzzed, Victor's office calling. Marion let it ring. The evening sun cast long shadows through the windows of Marion's office as she sat at her desk, a manila folder open before her. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago, forgotten as she pored over Caleb Brooks's personnel file. The more she read, the deeper her frown became. His service record was exemplary. Multiple commendations for valor under fire, specialized trauma medicine training, and glowing recommendations from commanding officers. Post-military, his work evaluations showed consistent excellence, not a single disciplinary mark. Yet there it was, buried in the HR notes. 3 rejected applications for EMT recertification, each citing vague behavioral concerns and stability questions. Marion pulled off her reading glasses and rubbed her temples. The language was careful, corporate smooth, exactly the kind of words that could mean everything or nothing. She'd seen this before, these subtle ways of saying no without saying why. The cafeteria was quiet at this hour, most of the day shift gone home. Following a hunch, Marion took the service elevator down. Sure enough, through the break room window, she spotted Caleb. He wore simple navy scrubs now, methodically packaging leftover meals into containers. She knocked softly on the doorframe. Mind if I join you? Caleb looked up, surprise flickering across his face. Ms. Alvarez. He straightened, hands still holding a container of what looked like shepherd's pie. Of course. Please, it's Marion. She stepped in, noticing how he'd arranged the containers with medical precision. That's quite a system you have there. Old habit from the service. Everything has its place. He sealed another container. Mia loves the mac and cheese here. Figure it's better than it going to waste. Marion settled into one of the plastic chairs, watching him work. How is Mia? Good. A small smile softened his features. She's with our neighbor, Mrs. Chen, tonight. Makes these amazing dumplings she always saves for Mia. You're lucky to have good neighbors. We are. He hesitated, then added, Though, I wish I could afford better childcare. Mrs. Chen's getting older, and after-school programs. He trailed off, focusing on his task. Marion nodded, then decided to be direct. I reviewed your file today, Caleb, including the EMT applications. His hands stilled for just a moment before continuing their work. 3 rejections, all citing behavioral concerns. Yet I see nothing in your record to justify that label. She leaned forward. Want to tell me what's really going on? Caleb was quiet for a long moment, methodically sealing another container. When he spoke, his voice was measured. First interview, the panel asked how I'd handle my anger issues. I told them I'd never had any. They brought up PTSD statistics for veterans. And the second time? Questions about Mia. Who watches her during shifts? What if she gets sick? Would I be reliable as a single parent? He stacked the containers carefully. Third time, they didn't even finish the interview, just thanked me for my service and said they'd be in touch. Anger flared in Marion's chest, but she kept her voice steady. They never put any of that in writing, did they? No, ma'am. They're too smart for that. He met her eyes then, and she saw not bitterness, but a deep weariness. Look, I get it. Single black father, combat veteran. They see liability, not capability. Easier to say no than take what they see as a risk. That's discrimination, Caleb. Pure and simple. He shrugged, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. Maybe. But proving it? That's different. And Mia needs me working, not fighting battles I can't win. Marion stood, smoothing her skirt with practiced calm. What if you didn't have to fight alone? Ms. Alvarez. Marion, I appreciate the thought, but you've already stuck your neck out enough today with Jenny and Nico. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. She stepped closer, her voice firm. This isn't just about you, Caleb. It's about every qualified candidate who gets pushed aside because of who they are, not what they can do. I'm going to look into this personally. He studied her face, searching for something. Whatever he saw made him nod slowly. Thank you. But please, be careful. I've learned the hard way that some doors are better left closed. Sometimes, Marion said, thinking of her mother, of Jenny, of all the quiet battles fought in hospital hallways, those are exactly the doors that need opening. She watched as he gathered his containers, each movement precise and purposeful. Here was a man who'd saved lives under fire, who raised his daughter with gentle hands, who stepped between strangers and danger without hesitation. And someone somewhere had decided he wasn't stable enough to be trusted. I'll look into the certification board's practices, she said. Their criteria, their patterns of approval and rejection. If there's a system working against good people, it needs to change. That's a big fight, yes, but necessary ones usually are. Caleb sat at his kitchen table, a worn wooden surface covered with math worksheets and colorful pencils. The small apartment wasn't much, but he'd made it home with carefully chosen second-hand furniture and Mia's artwork brightening the walls. His daughter's tongue poked out in concentration as she worked on her addition problems. 7 + 5 =. Mia tapped each number with her pencil. 12. That's my girl. Caleb smiled, ruffling her braids. You're getting faster every day. Mia beamed at the praise, then jumped up from her chair. Daddy, wait! I want to show you something important. She scampered to her room, returning with a small cloth bag that jingled as she walked. These are my wish stones, she announced, carefully emptying the collection onto the table. Smooth pebbles of various colors and sizes rolled across the surface. I pray with them every night for people who need a do-over. Caleb's heart squeezed. A do-over? Yeah, like when you mess up in jump rope and get another try. Or when Ms. Martinez lets us erase our mistakes in art class. She picked up a pale blue stone, holding it to the light. Everyone deserves second chances, right, Daddy? Before Caleb could respond, a hesitant knock sounded at the door. Through the peephole, he saw Jenny Santos standing there with Nico, both looking rattled. He quickly opened the door. I'm sorry to disturb you, Jenny whispered, her arms protectively around Nico's shoulders. There are photographers outside our building, and I didn't know where else to go. Come in, please. Caleb ushered them inside, checking the hallway before closing the door. Are you hungry? I was just about to make dinner. Nico's eyes widened at the sight of Mia's stones. She noticed his interest and immediately held out a smooth red one. This one's for good luck. Want to hold it? The shy boy looked up at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. He stepped forward, accepting the stone with careful fingers. A small smile crept across his face. I'll get started on that spaghetti, Caleb announced, moving to the kitchen. "Jenny, please, sit down. Make yourself comfortable." As he filled a pot with water, he watched Jenny sink into a chair, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. The children were already deep in conversation, Mia showing Nico her homework and explaining how she solved the math problems. "Do you like school?" Mia asked, swinging her legs under the table. Nico nodded. "I'm in first grade. My teacher, Mrs. Kim, she's really nice. I'm in second grade. Maybe we can be friends at recess sometime." The simple exchange brought a hint of color back to Jenny's cheeks. Caleb worked efficiently in the kitchen, the familiar routine of cooking helping to ease some of the tension in the air. Soon, the apartment filled with the comforting smell of tomato sauce and garlic bread. "Can I help?" Jenny asked, standing up. "Sure. Would you mind getting the plates? They're in that cabinet there." They worked together quietly, setting the table while the kids continued chatting. Nico was gradually coming out of his shell, showing Mia how to stack the stones in tiny towers. "Look, Mommy," he called out. "We're building a castle." "That's beautiful, sweetheart." Jenny's voice caught slightly, and Caleb pretended not to notice her wiping her eyes. When the food was ready, they gathered around the table. Mia insisted on saying grace, adding a special prayer for all the people who need wish stones tonight. As they ate, the children swapped stories about their schools. Mia described her art project about space, while Nico shared his excitement about the class pet hamster. Their innocent chatter filled the small apartment with a warmth that made the evening's tension seem temporarily distant. "This is really good," Jenny said softly, twirling spaghetti around her fork. "Thank you for having us." "Any time," Caleb replied, meaning it. He understood what it was like to face the world alone with a child to protect. After dinner, while the kids returned to playing with the stones, Caleb and Jenny cleaned up. Through the kitchen window, he spotted several cars idling along the curb, their occupants suspiciously still. "Paparazzi," he murmured, keeping his voice low so the children wouldn't hear. "They must have followed you." Jenny's hands trembled as she dried a plate. "I don't know what to do. Mr. Harrington's lawyers keep calling, making threats about my job, about deportation." She set the plate down carefully. "Maybe I should just take what they're offering to stay quiet." Caleb glanced at their children, now sprawled on the living room floor drawing pictures together. "Ms. Alvarez, Marion. She might be our only hope. She seems different from the others." Jenny followed his gaze to where Nico was laughing at something Mia had said. It was the first time she'd heard him laugh in days. "I know," she whispered. "I just pray she's strong enough to stand up to them all." Through the window, another car pulled up to join the others, its camera lenses glinting in the streetlights. The morning sun cast long shadows across Marion's office as Evelyn strode in, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Her arms were laden with spreadsheets and financial reports, her expression grim. Without preamble, she spread the papers across Marion's desk like a dealer laying out cards for a losing hand. "The numbers don't lie," Evelyn said, pointing to a graph that showed a sharp downward trend. "If we lose the pharma partnership, we're looking at a 30% reduction in our expansion budget. That means no new senior care wing, no upgraded equipment, and we'll have to scale back our low-income programs." Marion leaned back in her chair, studying the stark reality presented in black and white. Outside her window, the morning traffic moved steadily, people going about their lives, unaware of the drama unfolding in this corner office. "The board members have been calling non-stop," Evelyn continued, her voice tight with tension. "They want what they're calling a containment strategy. In other words, they want us to silence Jenny and sweep this under the rug." Marion finished, her tone flat. "Exactly." Evelyn pulled up a chair, her usual professional demeanor softening slightly. "Look, Marion, I know you want to do the right thing, but we're talking about thousands of patients who depend on this hospital. Sometimes being a leader means making tough choices." Marion stood up and walked to her window, watching the people below. A young mother struggled with a stroller at the hospital entrance. An elderly man held the door open for her, his own movements careful and measured. "You're right about one thing," Marion said, turning back to face Evelyn. "This is about leadership. But maybe it's time we redefined what that means. She returned to her desk and pulled out a fresh notepad. With steady hands she began to write, her pen moving with purpose across the paper. "What are you doing?" Evelyn asked, leaning forward to peek at the growing notes. "Creating something new. Something that could change everything." Marian's voice grew stronger as she outlined her vision. "We'll call it Home Front Healing. A pilot program specifically designed to train veterans and single parents for healthcare positions." Evelyn's eyebrows shot up. "In the middle of this crisis? Have you lost your mind?" "Think about it," Marian pressed on. "We have Caleb Brooks, a former Army medic with proven skills. We have Jenny, who's shown incredible dedication as a housekeeper, despite her circumstances. They represent an untapped workforce of people who understand sacrifice, responsibility, and compassion." She began sketching out the program structure: paid training, flexible schedules, on-site childcare support. The more she wrote, the clearer the vision became. "The costs alone," Evelyn began, "will be offset by reduced turnover and increased staff stability," Marian countered. "Plus, think of the positive press. Instead of a scandal, we'll have a story of innovation and community support." Evelyn picked up one of the financial reports and tapped it against the desk, a nervous habit she'd developed over years of tough negotiations. "The board won't like this. It's risky, untested." "Then give me 90 days, Marian said, her voice firm. 3 months to prove this can work." Evelyn stood and paced the office, her analytical mind clearly running calculations. "You're asking me to stake my professional reputation on this too, you know." "I know." Marian met her CFO's gaze steadily. "But sometimes the biggest risks bring the greatest rewards." After what felt like an eternity, Evelyn let out a long breath. 90 days, she said, rolling her eyes but with a hint of grudging respect. "But I want weekly progress reports, detailed metrics, and a clear exit strategy if it fails." Marian nodded, already adding these requirements to her proposal. The morning light had shifted, warming the room as she outlined the program's framework. She detailed the training modules, the mentorship structure, the community partnerships they'd need. 3 board members called while she worked. Their messages grew increasingly urgent, demanding immediate action on the situation. Marian let them go to voicemail. This was more important. By late morning, the proposal took shape. 20 pages of hope and possibility, backed by careful planning and practical considerations. Marian reviewed each section, making small adjustments, ensuring every detail was accounted for. Finally, she set her pen down beside the completed proposal. The stack of papers represented more than just a program plan. It was a statement of values, a declaration that compassion and good business weren't mutually exclusive. Her phone buzzed again with another board member's call, but Marian's hand remained steady as she reached for her coffee instead. The risk she was taking was enormous. This could end her career if it failed. But as she looked at the proposal, she felt a deep sense of certainty. Her heart, for the first time since this crisis began, was completely steady. The VA chapel stood quiet in the late afternoon light. Stained glass windows cast soft patterns of blue and gold across worn wooden pews, and the familiar scent of beeswax candles filled the air. Marian paused in the doorway, her designer heels silent on the carpeted floor. Her shoulders, usually squared with confidence, drooped under the weight of decisions yet unmade. Chaplain Ruth Ellis sat in her usual spot near the front, her silver hair glowing in a shaft of amber light. She didn't turn around, but her gentle voice carried clearly. "I wondered when you'd find your way here." Marian slid into the pew beside Ruth, her crisp blazer rustling against the wood. Her hands, usually steady with surgical precision when signing contracts, trembled slightly as she folded them in her lap. "I don't know what to do, Ruth," Marian whispered. The words felt foreign in her mouth. She was used to being the one with answers, not questions. "Everything I've built over the last decade, it could all disappear by Friday." Ruth's weathered hands remained still on her worn Bible. Her presence had a steadying effect, like an anchor in stormy waters. "Tell me what's troubling your heart, dear one." Marian's careful composure cracked. If I stand up for Jenny and Caleb, I could lose the hospital's expansion deal. $50 million, Ruth. That money would help so many people. New equipment, more beds, better care for low-income seniors. She pressed her fingertips to her temples. But if I don't protect them, I'm no better than those who looked the other way when my mother. She couldn't finish the sentence. But Ruth nodded in understanding. The chaplain had heard Marian's story years ago, about her mother who had worked as a housekeeper, about the struggles and sacrifices that had paved Marian's path to medical school. And there's Caleb, Marian continued, her voice barely above a whisper. He served our country, saved countless lives, and now he can't even get a fair shot at recertification. The system that's supposed to protect people like him, like Jenny, it's broken. But trying to fix it might cost me everything I've worked for. Ruth turned slightly, her kind eyes finding Marian's. Everything you've worked for, she repeated softly. Or everything you've been called to do? The question hung in the chapel's hushed air. Somewhere outside, a siren wailed in the distance, another reminder of the countless lives depending on North Star's care. I keep thinking about what Thomas would say, Marian admitted, thinking of her late husband. He always knew the right thing to do, even when it wasn't the easy thing. Thomas was a good man, Ruth agreed. But he didn't have all the answers either. He just knew how to listen to his heart and to God. Marian's fingers found the small cross she wore beneath her blouse, Thomas's last gift to her. I'm scared, Ruth. For the first time in years, I'm truly scared. Ruth's hand covered Marian's, warm and steady. Fear isn't the enemy, dear one. It's what we do with it that matters. She paused, letting the words settle. You know, every morning, I talk to veterans who are afraid they'll never feel whole again. Every afternoon I counsel families terrified of losing their loved ones. And do you know what I tell them? Marian shook her head. Do the next right thing, Ruth said simply. Just the next one. Let God handle your title. The chapel fell quiet again. Through the stained glass, the late afternoon sun painted healing colors across the altar. Marian breathed in deeply, feeling something shift inside her chest, like a key turning in a long rusted lock. Rising slowly, she made her way to the altar where a cluster of votives flickered. She picked up a fresh candle, touched its wick to an existing flame. As the new light caught and grew steady, she whispered her husband's name, Thomas. The flame danced, strong and sure, like the conviction growing in her heart. Without another word, Marian turned and walked out of the chapel, her steps purposeful, her spine straight. The weight of fear still pressed against her shoulders, but something else moved with her now, resolve, clear as morning light. Ruth watched her go, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She turned back to her Bible, fingers finding a well-worn page, and continued her quiet vigil in the chapel's peace. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of Marian's private office, casting thin stripes across her desk. Jenny Santos sat across from her, hands clasped tightly in her lap, her dark eyes fixed on the medical consent forms before her. The lab will handle everything with complete discretion, Marian explained softly. No one outside this room will know about the test unless you choose to share the results. Jenny's fingers trembled as she reached for the pen. What if... She swallowed hard. What if he tries to take Nico away? That won't happen, Marian assured her, leaning forward. We're doing this to protect you and Nico. To give you proof, one way or another. The scratch of pen on paper seemed loud in the quiet room. Jenny signed her name with careful strokes, then reached into her worn canvas bag. She pulled out a wrinkled manila envelope, holding it close to her chest for a moment before placing it on the desk. I kept everything, she whispered, even when Mr. Mason told me to destroy them. Mr. Mason? Marian asked. Victor's lawyer. He came to my apartment 3 years ago. Jenny's voice grew even quieter. He said no one would believe me. That I'd lose my job, my visa. She pushed the envelope toward Marian. But I couldn't throw them away. Marian opened the envelope carefully. Inside were dozens of letters, some on hotel stationery, others on personal letterhead bearing Victor's initials, text messages printed on paper, bank statements showing deposits, followed by threatening emails demanding silence. May I? Marian asked, and Jenny nodded. The earliest letter was dated 6 years ago, written in Victor's distinctive scrawl. "My dearest Jenny, last night was wonderful. I've arranged a special bonus for your discretion." Marian's stomach turned as she read through more letters, watching the tone shift from seductive to controlling. Then came the legal letters from Mason Associates. Cease and desist warnings. Thinly veiled threats about immigration status. A settlement offer that would have bound Jenny to complete silence. "I was so scared," Jenny whispered, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. But Nico kept asking about his father, and when he saw Victor in the lobby that day, she shook her head. "I couldn't stop him. Maybe part of me didn't want to." Marian reached across the desk and squeezed Jenny's hand. "You were brave to keep these. Braver still to come forward now." A soft knock interrupted them. The lab technician had arrived, a kind-faced woman who smiled warmly at Jenny. "Ready for the swab test?" Jenny nodded, then pulled out her phone to text Caleb. He had offered to bring Nico up from the hospital's daycare center, where he was playing with Mia under the watchful eye of Chaplain Ruth. Minutes later, Nico bounced into the room, his face lighting up when he saw his mother. Caleb followed, his steady presence filling the doorway. "Hey buddy," the lab tech said, kneeling to Nico's level. "Would you help me with a special science experiment? All you have to do is let me touch the inside of your cheek with this soft cotton swab." Nico looked at Jenny, who managed an encouraging smile. "It's okay, sweetheart. Just like brushing your teeth." The boy opened his mouth obediently, giggling when the swab tickled his cheek. The tech sealed the sample in a sterile container, then gathered her supplies. "Results should be ready in 48 hours, she explained, heading for the door. Jenny clutched her bag close, the empty envelope tucked safely inside. "What happens now?" "Now we wait," Marian said gently. "The letters are secure in my safe. You and Nico go home and rest. I'll call as soon as I have news." Caleb stepped forward. "I'll drive them. My shift just ended, and Mia's eager for a playdate anyway." As they walked through the hospital corridors, Caleb kept a protective eye on their surroundings. Jenny held Nico's hand while he skipped alongside her, chattering about the games he'd played with Mia. None of them noticed the reporter lurking near the parking garage, snapping photos with a telephoto lens. None of them saw him jot down Caleb's license plate number as they drove away, or heard him mumble into his phone about digging into the Army medic's background. They were too focused on supporting each other, on the small moments of connection that had brought them together. As Caleb navigated through traffic, Jenny gazed out the window, her mother's rosary wrapped around her fingers. For the first time in years, her prayers weren't filled with fear. Instead, she found herself whispering words of gratitude for these unexpected allies who stood beside her, helping her carry this heavy truth into the light. In the back seat, Nico and Mia played thumb war, their laughter a reminder that even in the midst of adult complications, children could find joy in simple things. Jenny closed her eyes, letting that sound wash over her like a blessing. The spring sunshine warmed the hospital's sprawling front lawn, now transformed into a bustling community health fair. Red and white tents dotted the grass, each offering free screenings and health information. Children darted between the booths, clutching colorful balloons printed with North Star's logo. Caleb Brooks wiped sweat from his forehead as he arranged blood pressure cuffs and stethoscopes at his first aid station. The familiar weight of medical supplies in his hands brought back memories of his Army days, the good ones, of helping people and saving lives. "Need any help with that setup?" A volunteer in a bright blue t-shirt approached. "Almost done, thanks," Caleb smiled, adjusting the information pamphlets one last time. His daughter Mia sat cross-legged nearby, carefully arranging "I got checked" stickers into neat rows. The fair had drawn hundreds from the surrounding neighborhoods. Elderly couples strolled arm in arm between booths, offering diabetes screenings and flu shots. Young mothers pushed strollers toward the pediatric tent, where nurses gave out free children's vitamins and safety information. At the center of it all stood Marian Alvarez, moving from station to station with practiced ease. Her usual business suit had been replaced by pressed khakis and a polo shirt bearing the hospital logo, but she carried herself with the same quiet authority. "The turnout's amazing," Caleb said as she passed his booth. Marion beamed. "This is what community health should look like. No barriers, no judgment, just care for anyone who needs it." The morning flew by in a blur of blood pressure checks and basic first aid demonstrations. Caleb found himself relaxing into the rhythm of it, explaining proper bandaging techniques to curious kids and helping seniors understand their blood pressure numbers. Just after noon, a commotion erupted near the refreshment tent. "Help! Someone help!" The cry cut through the cheerful buzz of the fair. Caleb's head snapped up. Through the crowd, he spotted an elderly man crumpled on the ground, his wife kneeling beside him in panic. Without hesitation, Caleb vaulted over his table and sprinted toward them. The crowd parted as he approached. The man lay motionless, his skin ashen. Caleb dropped to his knees, muscle memory from years of training taking over. "Sir, can you hear me?" No response. He checked for breathing. Nothing. Quickly, he loosened the man's collar and tilted his head back. "Someone call 911, he called out, voice steady and clear. As he began chest compressions, he was dimly aware of phones being raised around him, recording the scene. 1, 2, 3, 4, he counted steadily, demonstrating perfect form. "When I say switch, you take over," he told a younger man who had stepped forward to help. The minutes stretched like hours as Caleb coordinated the impromptu rescue effort. He guided others in taking turns with compressions, keeping count out loud, his calm voice an anchor in the crisis. "Come on, Mr. Chen," the man's wife pleaded. Caleb learned the patient's name was Robert Chen, 72 years old, with a history of heart problems. Finally, Mr. Chen gave a weak cough. Color began returning to his face as he drew shallow breaths. The crowd erupted in relieved applause just as paramedics arrived with a gurney. "Perfect compression rhythm maintained throughout," the lead EMT noted as they loaded Mr. Chen into the ambulance. "You probably saved his life." "You medical?" "Former Army medic," Caleb replied, helping gather the scattered medical supplies. "Could have fooled me. You worked that scene like a pro EMT." As the ambulance pulled away, Caleb became aware of the crowd still gathered around him. Phones were still recording. Mia rushed over to hug him tight. "That was amazing, Daddy." Marion appeared at his side, eyes bright with emotion. She squeezed his shoulder. "Outstanding work, Caleb. Simply outstanding." Through the dispersing onlookers, he spotted Evelyn Cho, leaning close to whisper something in Marion's ear. The CFO's usually stern expression had softened into something like hope. The rest of the health fair carried on, but now people stopped by Caleb's booth, just to shake his hand or snap photos. He handled the attention with characteristic humility, turning each interaction into a chance to educate about CPR and basic life support. Children gathered around as he demonstrated proper hand placement for chest compressions on a practice dummy. "Remember," he explained patiently, "you push to the beat of Staying Alive." The kids giggled as he hummed a few bars of the disco classic. The afternoon sun was beginning to slant when Marion returned to his station. She watched him carefully pack away the medical supplies, his movements precise and practiced. "Your quick action today showed everyone exactly what the Homefront Healing Program is about," she said. "Skilled veterans using their training to serve the community." The crowd broke into spontaneous applause again. Looking up, Caleb saw Mr. Chen's wife approaching with tears in her eyes and gratitude in her smile. At the edge of the scene, Evelyn leaned close to Marion's ear, whispering something that made the CEO's face light up with renewed hope. The evening sun painted long shadows across Jefferson Park as Caleb and Mia walked home from the health fair. Their footsteps crunched along the gravel path, matching the steady rhythm of crickets beginning their nightly chorus. Mia skipped alongside her father, still wearing the volunteer badge from the fair, her braids bouncing with each step. "Daddy, you're famous," Mia exclaimed, tugging at his hand. "Everyone was taking pictures when you helped that grandpa. Even Mrs. Cho was smiling." Caleb chuckled softly, a sound that surprised even himself. It had been so long since laughter came easily. "I don't know about famous, sweetheart. I just did what needed doing." They stopped at their favorite bench, the one overlooking the duck pond. The setting sun sparkled on the water like scattered pennies. Mia pulled out a small stone from her pocket, smooth and gray with a white streak running through it. and added it to her growing collection. "This one's special," she declared, holding it up to catch the light. "It's for today, 'cause you got to be a doctor again." "Medical technician," Caleb corrected gently, but his heart swelled at his daughter's pride. "And we'll see about that. Ms. Alvarez said she'd help with the EMT program, but there's still a lot of work ahead." A cool breeze rustled the maple leaves above them. Mia leaned against her father's arm, her small hand finding his larger one. "You look just like the superheroes in my books, Daddy. All calm and brave, and everything." Caleb's throat tightened. He remembered the moment clearly, the elderly man collapsing near the blood pressure station, the crowd's panic, his own training taking over. His hands had known exactly what to do, muscle memory from countless similar situations in combat zones and field hospitals. "You know what, Mia Bug?" he said, using his special nickname for her. "Today felt good, real good." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes, after leaving the Army, I wasn't sure if I'd ever feel useful like that again." Mia looked up at him with those wise eyes that sometimes made him forget she was only 7. "But you're always useful, Daddy. You make the best pancakes, and you know how to fix my bike, and you help me with math." Caleb laughed again, and this time it felt natural, like slipping into a favorite old jacket. "Well, thank you, baby girl. But this was different. When that man needed help today, everything just clicked, like pieces falling into place." They watched as a family of ducks paddled across the pond, the babies following their mother in a wobbly line. Mia pulled out her homework folder, showing him a gold star on her spelling test. "Miss Alvarez said something about a program," Caleb continued, helping Mia zip her backpack. "Something about helping veterans get back into healthcare. I might actually have a shot at the EMT certification this time." "Really?" Mia's eyes lit up. "Then you could ride in the ambulance and help people all the time." "That's the hope, sweetheart." Caleb smiled. A real, full smile that reached his eyes. He couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this light, this hopeful. The weight he'd carried since leaving the Army seemed just a little less heavy. A text message buzzed on his phone. It was from Marian Alvarez. "Great work today. Meeting Monday to discuss EMT program. Bring your paperwork." Mia peered at the message. "See? I told you you're famous now. Famous enough to get you home for dinner," Caleb said, standing and offering his hand. "Race you to the playground?" Mia took off running, her laughter echoing across the park. Caleb jogged after her, his steps feeling lighter than they had in years. The viral video, the attention, the praise, none of that mattered as much as this moment, running through the park with his daughter, feeling like himself again. Across town, in his penthouse office, Victor Harrington sat in his leather chair, watching the evening news. The footage from the health fair played on his massive screen, Caleb performing CPR, directing bystanders with calm authority, the elderly patient giving a thumbs up from the stretcher. The news anchor's voice filled the room. A heartwarming moment at North Star Hospital's community health fair, where an Army veteran and single father demonstrated the power of quick thinking and medical training. Victor's jaw clenched as he reached for his phone. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Marian's office, casting long rectangles of light across her polished desk. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held the sealed envelope from GeneTech Labs. The corporate logo's metallic finish caught the light, making it seem to shimmer. She had been staring at it for 5 minutes, unable to break the seal. Finally, with a deep breath, she slid her letter opener under the flap. The crisp sound of tearing paper seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet office. She pulled out the single sheet of results, her eyes immediately drawn to the bold numbers at the bottom. 99.9% probability of paternity. Marian closed her eyes for a moment, letting the weight of those numbers settle over her. She had expected this, of course, but seeing it confirmed in stark black and white made her stomach clench. Her hand reached for her phone, pressing the intercom button. "Sarah, could you please ask Jenny Santos to come to my office?" Her voice remained steady, professional, though her heart was racing. While waiting, Marian reviewed the rest of the report. The clinical language couldn't mask the human story behind the genetic markers and probability calculations. She thought of little Nico's brave face in the lobby that day, his small hand reaching for Victor's sleeve. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Jenny stood in the doorway, wearing her gray housekeeping uniform, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "You wanted to see me, Miss Alvarez? Please, come in, Jenny, and call me Marion." She gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Would you like some water?" Jenny shook her head as she perched on the edge of the chair, her back straight with tension, her eyes fixed on the envelope on Marion's desk, recognizing the lab's logo. "The results came in this morning," Marion said gently, sliding the paper across the desk. Jenny's hands shook as she picked up the report. Her eyes scanned the page, lingering on that damning percentage. A small sound escaped her throat, something between a gasp and a sob. "It's true," she whispered. "Even though I knew." Seeing it like this, tears began rolling down her cheeks. Marion moved around her desk, pulling a chair close to Jenny. She offered a box of tissues, waiting patiently as the younger woman tried to compose herself. "Can you tell me what happened?" Marion asked softly. "Whatever you share stays in this room." Jenny twisted the tissue in her hands, her voice barely audible. "I was 26, new to the country. I'd only been working at the hospital for 3 months. She swallowed hard. "Mr. Harrington, Victor. He would always stop to talk when I cleaned his office. He seemed so kind at first." Marion's jaw tightened, but she kept her expression neutral, encouraging. "One night, I was working late. He invited me to have coffee in his office." Jenny's voice cracked. "He said he could help me get my green card, help my family back home." I was so naive. Fresh tears spilled down Jenny's cheeks. "When I found out I was pregnant, I tried to tell him, but his lawyer showed up at my apartment instead." She pulled a wrinkled envelope from her pocket, hands trembling as she withdrew several worn papers. "He made me sign these. Said if I ever told anyone, I'd lose my job, maybe get deported." Marion gently took the documents, scanning the legal jargon that had trapped this young mother in silence for 6 years. Her throat felt tight with anger. "They gave me money to keep quiet," Jenny continued, her voice hollow. "But I never touched it. It felt dirty. I just wanted to work, to give Nico a good life." She looked up at Marion, eyes swimming with tears. "I never meant for any of this to happen. When Nico saw Victor that day in the lobby, I couldn't stop him in time." "None of this is your fault," Marion said firmly, reaching out to squeeze Jenny's hand. "You were taken advantage of by a powerful man who thought he could buy his way out of responsibility." Jenny wiped her eyes. "What happens now?" Marion stood, walking to her window. The morning sun had climbed higher, warming her face as she looked out over the hospital grounds. Below, she could see patients and visitors moving through the courtyard, where she had first promised to help Jenny and Nico. "These results," she said, turning back to Jenny, "combined with those documents you kept, they prove everything. Victor can't hide from this anymore." She returned to her desk, carefully placing the DNA results and Jenny's papers in her briefcase. The metal clasps clicked shut with a sound of finality. "But I want you to understand something, Jenny. Using these, it will cause an earthquake. The board, the media, our donors, everyone will be affected." Jenny's face paled. "I don't want to hurt the hospital. Maybe we should just—" "No," Marion cut in, her voice gentle but firm. "We're not burying this. You and Nico deserve justice. And Victor." She touched her briefcase. "Victor needs to face the truth." The streetlights cast long shadows as Caleb walked home from his evening shift at North Star. His footsteps echoed against the quiet sidewalk while he thought about Mia waiting at home with their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen. The autumn air held a slight chill, and he pulled his jacket closer. Red and blue lights suddenly flashed behind him. Caleb's heart dropped as a police cruiser pulled up to the curb. "Sir, please stop, and put your hands where we can see them," an officer called through the patrol car's speaker. Caleb froze, his hands lifting slowly into the air. He'd been through this before. The automatic suspicion, the careful movements required to stay safe. 2 officers stepped out, hands near their weapons. "Are you Caleb Brooks?" the first officer asked, approaching cautiously. "Yes, sir, I am." Caleb kept his voice steady and calm. We have a warrant regarding an assault charge from 6 months ago at Murphy's Bar downtown. Caleb's mind raced back to that night. Sir, that situation was resolved. I was defending— Turn around, please. Hands behind your back. Camera flashes burst from across the street. Caleb's stomach churned as he spotted several photographers emerging from parked cars. This wasn't a coincidence. As the cold metal of handcuffs clicked around his wrists, Caleb thought only of Mia. Please, my daughter's at home waiting. Can I make a call? You'll get your phone call at the station, the officer said, guiding him toward the cruiser. More cameras flashed. Caleb ducked his head, but not before spotting a news van pulling up. His chest tightened. Everything he'd worked for, the EMT program, his position at North Star, Marion's trust, seemed to crumble with each click of the shutters. Across town in her office, Marion sat with Evelyn, both women staring at a laptop screen in horror. A video played, showing Caleb in what appeared to be a violent bar fight. But something felt wrong about the footage. It was heavily edited, cutting away at crucial moments. This just hit social media 10 minutes ago, Evelyn said, refreshing the page. It's spreading fast. 3 major donors have already called to express concerns about the Homefront Healing Program. Marion leaned closer to the screen. Look at the time-stamp jumps. This isn't the full story. Her phone buzzed with an incoming text from Jenny. They're arresting Caleb. News crews everywhere. What's happening? Before Marion could respond, her office door burst open. Victor Harrington strode in, followed by 2 board members and a PR representative. Quite a mess you've created, Marion, Victor said, his voice dripping with false concern. He adjusted his silk tie, a gesture she'd come to recognize as his tell when orchestrating something particularly underhanded. Victor, this is clearly a targeted attack. Marion stood, her voice firm despite her racing heart. The timing is too perfect. The timing? You mean just days before our crucial partnership vote? Victor turned to the board members. This is exactly why I've called an emergency session. Our CEO's judgment has become compromised. The PR rep handed Marion a tablet displaying a drafted press release. Her eyes widened as she read the headline. North Star Health CEO steps down amid staff violence scandal. You can't be serious, Marion said, dropping the tablet onto her desk. Oh, but I am. Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. You've put the entire hospital at risk, championing a violent man with obvious anger issues. The donors are fleeing. The partnership is hanging by a thread. And now, we have proof that your pet project was dangerously misguided. That video is edited, Marion insisted. And you know it. The public sees what it sees. Victor shrugged. And right now, they see a CEO who canceled a vital meeting to protect a maid making outrageous claims, then hired an unstable veteran who's being arrested as we speak. The board members shifted uncomfortably as Victor moved toward the windows overlooking the city. The responsible thing would be to step down gracefully, save the hospital any further embarrassment. Marion's phone buzzed again. Another text from Jenny. Caleb, in police car. Mia crying. Need help. On her office TV, the evening news was already running with the story. Helicopter footage showed Caleb being led into the police station, his head bowed. The ticker beneath read, North Star employee arrested. History of violence surfaces. I want to make this easy for you, Marion, Victor said, his voice soft but menacing. Resign now, and we'll ensure a generous severance package. Fight this, and well. He gestured to the TV. There's plenty more where that came from. Marion watched the news footage loop again, her hands clenched at her sides. Years of work, of building trust, of trying to make healthcare more compassionate, all being twisted into something ugly and false. Victor cleared his throat and addressed the room. As board chairman, I am officially calling for CEO Marion Alvarez's immediate resignation. The integrity of North Star Health must be protected. The PR rep was already typing on his phone, no doubt preparing to blast the announcement across all channels. The board members wouldn't meet Marion's eyes. She stared at Victor, seeing not just the powerful chairman, but a man desperately trying to bury his own sins beneath someone else's ruin. On her desk, next to the DNA results that proved his paternity of Nico, sat her mother's worn photo, a reminder of where she came from and why she fought so hard to reach this position. The news anchor's voice filled the heavy silence. In a shocking development, sources say North Star Health CEO Marian Alvarez may step down following today's arrest of a controversial employee. Board Chairman Victor Harrington is expected to make a statement shortly. Marian sat across from Evelyn at Bellini's, their usual Wednesday night spot. The small Italian restaurant's warm lighting and red checkered tablecloths usually brought comfort after long days, but tonight the cozy atmosphere felt at odds with the tension in her shoulders. "The DNA results are conclusive," Marian said quietly, pushing her untouched plate of pasta aside. "We can't ignore this anymore." Evelyn dabbed her mouth with a napkin. "The board meeting is in 2 days. Victor's already making waves about stability and proper procedures. We need to tread carefully." Careful won't help Jenny and Nico now. Marian's phone buzzed against the table. She glanced at it, ready to ignore another worried text from the board, but the caller ID made her sit up straight. "It's Ruth." "The chaplain? At this hour?" Marian answered, her face growing pale as she listened. "When? Which precinct?" "No, tell them I'm coming." She ended the call and grabbed her purse. "What happened?" Evelyn asked. "Caleb's been detained. Something about an old bar fight." Marian's hands shook as she pulled out her wallet. "They're saying he has a history of violence." "Marian." Evelyn's voice took on a warning tone. "Think about what you're doing. The video's already trending. The pharma deal is hanging by a thread. You saw him at the health fair. That man saves lives. And you need to save this hospital." Evelyn leaned forward. "Victor's people are spinning this. Unstable veteran. Anger issues. The morning shows will eat it up. If you get involved now, they're destroying a good man's life." Marian's voice carried across the restaurant. Several diners turned to look. She lowered her voice to a harsh whisper. "First Jenny, now Caleb. How many people do we sacrifice for the bottom line? This isn't about money." Evelyn's dark eyes held genuine concern. "It's about the thousands of patients who depend on North Star. The seniors who can't afford private care, the children's wing we could expand. That's what the 50 million would do." Marian's phone buzzed again. A text from Ruth. "Mia's asking for her father. Oh God." Marian pressed her hand to her mouth. "His daughter. Let his lawyer handle it," Evelyn pleaded. "Let the system work. You've done enough." Marian stared at her friend of 15 years, the woman who'd helped her build North Star into a beacon of hope. "Do you remember why we started this? Not just to heal bodies, but to restore dignity, to say every person matters." "Of course I remember." Evelyn's voice softened. "But we can't help anyone if we lose everything." "What's everything worth if we lose our soul?" Marian stood, throwing cash on the table. "My mother was a housekeeper, just like Jenny. She taught me courage isn't about winning, it's about doing what's right, even when it costs you." "Where are you going?" "To find Ruth." Marian shrugged on her coat. "She'll know what to do." "The board meeting is in 48 hours, Evelyn called after her. "Victor wants your resignation by morning." But Marian was already pushing through the restaurant door, letting the cold night air clear her head. Her heels clicked against the pavement as she walked to her car. The city lights blurred through unshed tears. Inside her car, she gripped the steering wheel, remembering Caleb's gentle way with Nico, how he'd made spaghetti for everyone that night, how his eyes lit up when Mia brought home an A in science. A good man, a healing presence. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Ruth. "I'm at the VA chapel. Come when you can." Marian started the engine. The dashboard clock read 9:47 p.m. In less than 2 days, she could lose everything she'd built. Her career, her legacy, the hospital's future. But as she pulled away from the curb, she remembered something else her mother used to say. "True north isn't a place, Mia Moore. It's the direction your heart knows is right." She turned toward the VA hospital, leaving behind the warm lights of Bellini's and Evelyn's practical wisdom. Sometimes the hardest path was the only one worth taking. The night had turned bitter cold. Marian pulled her coat tighter and stepped out of her car in the VA parking lot. Somewhere in this city, Caleb sat in a cell while his daughter waited. Somewhere, Jenny held Nico close, wondering if truth would ever win. Wind whipped at her face as she hurried toward the chapel entrance. Ruth would be waiting with her quiet wisdom and steady faith. Right now, Marion needed both more than she needed her title or the board's approval. She reached for the chapel door, her mother's words echoing in her mind. True north isn't a place. Tonight, she would find her direction again, even if it meant walking into the storm. The clock on Marion's office wall ticked past midnight. Outside her window, the city lights twinkled like distant stars, but she barely noticed them. Her hands trembled as she held the worn envelope she'd retrieved from her personal safe. Her mother's familiar handwriting graced the front. For Marion, to be opened when you need answers. Tonight, she needed answers more than ever. The envelope seal broke with a soft tear. Inside, she found several pages of her mother's distinctive script, the letters flowing across the yellowed paper like gentle waves. Marion switched on her desk lamp, its warm glow creating a small circle of light in the darkness. "My dearest daughter," the letter began. Marion's throat tightened as she read on. "By the time you read this, I will be gone. There is something I've carried in my heart for too long, something you deserve to know. Your father wasn't the man whose name appears on your birth certificate. Your real father was Richard Montgomery, the man whose house I cleaned for 15 years. Marion's hands shook harder. She set the pages down on her desk, needing a moment to steady herself. The name struck her like a physical blow. Richard Montgomery had been one of the city's most prominent businessmen in the 1970s. She remembered her mother mentioning him occasionally, always with a certain hesitation in her voice. Taking a deep breath, she continued reading. "It happened during a vulnerable time in my life. Richard was kind to me, showed me attention when I felt invisible. But when I told him I was pregnant, everything changed. He was married, had a reputation to protect. He offered money for my silence, threatened to destroy any chance I had of finding other work if I spoke up." Tears blurred Marion's vision. She thought of Jenny, of the similar threats she'd faced, of the weight of silence she'd carried all these years. The parallel was overwhelming. "I chose to keep you and raise you alone," her mother's letter continued. "It wasn't easy, but every sacrifice was worth it. I watched you grow into a strong, compassionate woman. But I've seen the shame in your eyes sometimes, when people asked about your father. I've carried that guilt every day." Marion stood up, walking to her office window. Her reflection stared back at her, and for a moment, she saw her mother's features in her own face. The same determined set of the jaw, the same gentle eyes that could turn steel hard when needed. "I'm writing this because I don't want my shame to become your inheritance. The truth is messy, painful, but hiding it only gives it power. I was a housekeeper who fell in love with the wrong man, who was silenced by money and power. But that's not the end of my story, and it's not the beginning of yours." The words on the page began to blur together as Marion's tears fell freely now. She remembered her mother's quiet dignity, how she'd worked extra shifts to put Marion through college, how she'd held her head high even when others looked down on her. "You've achieved so much, my daughter. But remember, your position, your power, they're not just for you. They're tools to help others who are silenced, who carry secrets that shouldn't be burdens. Don't let fear of losing what you've built keep you from doing what's right." Marion returned to her desk, sinking into her chair. The last page of the letter trembled in her hands. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you this in person. The shame was too deep, too old. But I hope that by sharing this truth now, I can help you understand. We are not defined by the secrets others make us keep. We are defined by the moments we choose to speak up, to stand firm, to protect others from the pain we've known." The final paragraph made Marion's heart clench. "My beautiful, brave daughter. Whatever challenges you face when you read this, remember, the truth may cost you, but silence costs more. Your voice is your power. Use it wisely, use it kindly, but most importantly, use it." The letter ended with a simple, "I love you, Mom," and a date from 5 years ago, just months before her mother's passing. Marion sat in silence, letting the weight of the revelation settle over her. All these years, her mother had carried this secret, this shame, just like Jenny, just like so many others, who had been silenced by power and privilege. She thought about Victor Harrington, about his attempts to bury the truth about Nico, about the way he wielded power like a weapon. She thought about Caleb, unjustly detained because of a manipulated video. She thought about Jenny, trembling but still standing, fighting for her son's future. The parallels were too stark to ignore. History was trying to repeat itself, but this time, someone in power had a choice to make. Marion stood up, her mother's letter clutched in her hand. Her voice was barely a whisper in the quiet office, but it carried the weight of generations of silence finally being broken. No more hiding. The letter had become more than just a confession. It was a torch being passed, a challenge being issued. The shame that had silenced her mother wouldn't silence another generation. Not if Marion could help it. The fluorescent lights of North Star Health dimmed to a soft glow as evening settled over the hospital. Through the large windows, the setting sun painted streaks of orange and purple across the sky. Along the main corridor leading to the boardroom, dozens of people lined the walls. Hospital staff in scrubs and white coats stood shoulder to shoulder with community members, each holding a flickering candle. Marion walked slowly down the hallway, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Her navy suit felt like armor, but her heart pounded with uncertainty. On either side of her, Caleb and Jenny moved forward, their faces illuminated by the gentle candlelight. Jenny clutched Nico's hand, her other hand trembling around her candle. The boy looked up at the faces of those gathered, his eyes wide with wonder rather than fear. Caleb walked with military precision, but his expression softened when he caught sight of Mia standing with Chaplain Ruth near the middle of the hallway. A young nurse stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "Ms. Alvarez, we're with you," she whispered, her voice catching. "My brother's a vet too. What they did to Mr. Brooks, it's not right." More voices joined in, quiet but determined. "We stand with Jenny. Truth matters. God bless you, Miss Alvarez." The murmurs of support wrapped around them like a warm blanket. Marion felt tears threatening, but blinked them back. She'd cried enough in the chapel last night. Now was the time for strength. Suddenly, rapid footsteps echoed through the hallway. Evelyn burst through the entrance, her usually perfect hair slightly disheveled, clutching a laptop to her chest. Her face was flushed with excitement. "Marion!" she called out, hurrying toward them. "I got it! The uncut footage!" The crowd parted to let her through. Evelyn's hands shook as she opened her laptop, balancing it carefully while still holding her candle. The bar's security cameras caught everything. "I had to call in every favor I had with the police department, but—" She pressed play. The grainy footage showed the interior of a dimly lit bar. Caleb sat quietly at a corner table, nursing what looked like a club soda. In the background, a group of men grew increasingly rowdy, their attention focused on an older man wearing a Vietnam veteran's cap. "Turn it up," Marion instructed softly. The audio was scratchy, but clear enough to hear the slurs being hurled at the older veteran. Caleb's head snapped up at the commotion. The footage showed him rising slowly, approaching the group with his palms raised in a non-threatening gesture. "Gentlemen," Caleb's voice came through clearly, steady and professional. "Let's take this outside. This man served our country." One of the aggressors swung wildly. Caleb blocked the punch and carefully redirected the man away from the veteran, never throwing a strike of his own. While maintaining his defensive stance, he could be seen pulling out his phone. "Yes? We need police at Murphy's Bar. On 5th Street? Caleb's voice was calm as he spoke to dispatch. "Potential assault situation. One elderly veteran at risk. Please respond quickly." The footage continued, showing Caleb protecting the older veteran until police arrived. Not once did he escalate the situation or respond with violence. Jenny squeezed Caleb's arm. "You were protecting someone, just like you protected us in the lobby." Caleb ducked his head, uncomfortable with the attention. "Just did what needed doing." Evelyn closed the laptop, her eyes shining with unexpected emotion. "The police report confirms everything. They're dropping all charges, and the DA is issuing a formal apology for the detention." Marion touched Evelyn's shoulder, surprised to find her usually stoic CFO fighting back tears. "Thank you, Evelyn. I know what this took." "I was wrong," Evelyn admitted quietly. "About everything. About playing it safe. about protecting the bottom line at any cost. She looked at Jenny and Nico, then at Caleb. Some things matter more than numbers. A soft melody began to float through the hallway. Chaplain Ruth had started humming Amazing Grace, and others joined in. The sound swelled gently, filling the space with hope. Mia slipped away from Chaplain Ruth and ran to her father, wrapping her arms around his waist. "See, Daddy, my do! Overstone worked!" Caleb lifted her up, holding her close. "Maybe it did, baby girl. Maybe it did." Marion surveyed the scene before her, the candlelit faces of her staff and community, Evelyn's newfound conviction, Jenny's growing confidence, and Caleb's quiet dignity. Tomorrow's board meeting loomed large, but looking at these people, she knew with absolute certainty that she was doing the right thing. Evelyn stepped closer, speaking softly. "The board meeting starts at 9. Victor doesn't know about this footage yet." "Good," Marion replied. "Let's keep it that way until morning." Through the windows, the last rays of sunlight faded into dusk. The candles glowed brighter in the growing darkness, each flame a testament to the power of truth and compassion. Marion nodded, feeling the weight of tomorrow's confrontation settle on her shoulders, but she was ready. The time for hiding was over. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of North Star Health's boardroom, casting long shadows across the polished oak table. 20 board members sat rigid in their leather chairs, their faces a mix of concern and curiosity. At the head of the table, Victor Harrington stood, his usual commanding presence now tinged with barely contained anger. "This circus has gone on long enough," Victor declared, his voice sharp in the quiet room. He adjusted his gold cufflinks, a nervous tell he'd developed over his decades in power. Ms. Alvarez's recent decisions have created instability that threatens the very foundation of this institution. Marion sat calmly at the opposite end, her hands folded neatly on top of her leather portfolio. She wore her favorite Navy suit, the one she'd worn to her first board meeting as CEO. Her mother had always told her to dress for the battles you knew were coming. "The 50 million partnership is at risk," Victor continued, pacing now. "Our donors are nervous. The press is having a field day, and why?" He paused, for effect. "Because our CEO chose to entertain baseless accusations from a housekeeper and champion a security guard with anger management issues." Murmurs rippled through the room. Marion noticed several board members shifting uncomfortably in their seats. She caught Evelyn's eye from where her CFO sat against the wall, nodding almost imperceptibly. "I move that we accept Marion Alvarez's immediate resignation," Victor announced, "and begin the search for a CEO who understands the proper priorities of this institution." The room fell silent. Marion rose slowly, smoothing her jacket. "Before we vote," she said, her voice steady, "I have some documents to share." She lifted 3 folders from her portfolio, handing them to the board secretary for distribution. The first contains DNA test results from an independent laboratory, she explained as the folders made their way around the table. "They confirm with 99.9% certainty that Victor Harrington is the biological father of Nico Santos." Victor's face reddened. "This is preposterous. I won't stand for—" "The second folder," Marion continued, raising her voice slightly, "contains letters spanning the past 9 years. They document how Mr. Harrington's personal attorney pressured Jenny Santos to remain silent about her son's parentage through threats and financial coercion." The board members began opening folders, their expressions shifting from skepticism to shock as they reviewed the contents. One older woman removed her glasses, rubbing her eyes as if the action might somehow change what she'd just read. "And the third?" Victor demanded, his voice cracking slightly. "Security footage from the bar incident involving Caleb Brooks," Marion replied. "The unedited version shows Mr. Brooks de-escalating a confrontation where 3 men were harassing a disabled veteran. He protected the victim, called 911, and waited with the injured man until help arrived." She paused. "The police have dropped all charges." Victor slumped into his chair, the color draining from his face. The room felt thick with tension as board members continued reviewing the documents, whispering among themselves. "Mr. Harrington," the board secretary spoke up, "would you like to respond to these materials?" Victor stared at his hands, now trembling slightly on the table. The morning sun caught his signet ring, the same one he'd worn for 40 years of board meetings, through countless victories and power plays. But now, for the first time, he looked small. "It's true," he whispered, then cleared his throat and spoke louder. "It's all true." The admission seemed to physically pain him as he continued. 9 years ago, I took advantage of my position. Jenny Santos was young, new to this country. When she told me she was pregnant, I had my lawyer handle it. He swallowed hard. I convinced myself it was better for everyone if it just went away. Marion watched his confession with a mixture of sadness and relief. This man, who had wielded such power, who had seemed untouchable for so long, was finally facing the truth he'd buried. "I'll step down from the board, effective immediately," Victor said, his voice hollow. "And I'll establish a trust for Nico." He looked up at Marion, really seeing her for the first time. "I'm sorry. To all of you. But especially to Jenny and my son." The silence that followed felt heavy with the weight of decades of secrets finally brought to light. Victor stood slowly, gathered his papers with shaking hands, and walked toward the door. Just before leaving, he turned back one last time. "Miss Alvarez," he said quietly, "you are a better leader than I ever was." The door clicked shut behind him, leaving the boardroom in stunned silence. Victor's tirade about Marion's leadership suddenly faltered as she quietly placed 3 items on the boardroom table: a sealed envelope containing DNA test results, a stack of old letters tied with faded ribbon, and a USB drive with security footage. The room fell silent. Victor's face, usually a mask of confidence, began to crumble at the edges. His shoulders, always so proudly squared, seemed to sink under an invisible weight. "I've spent 40 years building this hospital's reputation," he said, his voice uncharacteristically thin. His hands gripped the back of his chair until his knuckles turned white. 40 years of fundraising, expanding services, creating partnerships. Marion remained silent, her dark eyes fixed on him with quiet compassion. The morning sun caught the small key pin on her lapel, a reminder of all the doors that needed opening, all the truths that needed telling. "But I've also spent 6 years running from something." Victor's voice cracked. He looked around the boardroom, meeting the eyes of colleagues who had trusted him for decades. 6 years trying to bury a truth that refused to stay buried. A collective intake of breath filled the room. Several board members leaned forward in their chairs. Evelyn Cho, seated near Marion, gripped her pen so tightly it seemed ready to snap. "The boy, Nico Santos." Victor's voice wavered. He closed his eyes for a moment, gathering what remained of his courage. "He is my son." The confession hung in the air like suspended glass, fragile and sharp. Someone gasped. Another board member whispered, "Dear God." "I met Jenny Santos 6 years ago," Victor continued, each word seeming to age him further. "She was new to the housekeeping staff. I took advantage of my position. When she told me she was pregnant, I had my lawyer pressure her into silence, offered her money to disappear." His voice broke. "She refused the money but kept quiet, not for my sake, but because she needed the job to support her child, my child." He turned to face the window, his silhouette dark against the morning light. "I convinced myself I was protecting the hospital's reputation. In reality, I was protecting my own pride. I watched from a distance as my son grew up without a father, as Jenny worked double shifts to make ends meet." Victor's hands trembled as he reached for a glass of water. "When Nico approached me in the lobby that day, speaking a truth I'd tried so hard to deny, I realized what a coward I've been." He turned back to face the board, his eyes red-rimmed but clear. "I owe apologies to so many people. To Jenny, who carried this burden alone. To Nico, who deserved so much more than my silence. To Marion, who had the courage to stand up for what was right when I could not." Taking a deep breath, Victor straightened his tie, a final, familiar gesture of composure. "I am resigning from my position as board chair, effective immediately." Murmurs rippled through the room. Several board members started to speak, but Victor held up his hand. "My final act will be to establish a trust fund for Nico Santos," It's a poor substitute for 6 years of absence, but it's the least I can do to ensure his future education and well-being." He removed his board chair pin and placed it carefully on the table. "The amount will be substantial enough to cover any education he chooses to pursue, plus additional funds for his general welfare." Looking directly at Marion, he added, "And I hope the board will recognize that Ms. Prostanen Alvarez's actions, which I so wrongly tried to condemn, represent exactly the kind of moral leadership this institution needs." With those words, Victor Harrington, the man who had ruled North Star's board for nearly 2 decades, walked to the door. His hand paused on the handle, and for a moment he seemed about to say something more. Instead, he simply nodded once and stepped out, leaving behind a legacy both tarnished and, perhaps, finally redeemed. The boardroom remained silent in his wake, the morning sun continuing its slow march across the polished table, illuminating the evidence that had finally brought truth into the light. The boardroom air felt thick with tension as 14 pairs of eyes moved between the evidence on the table and Victor's trembling form. Marion sat perfectly still, her spine straight despite the exhaustion weighing on her shoulders. She had done what needed to be done. Now, her fate rested in others' hands. Dr. Thompson, the eldest board member, adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "These are serious matters we're faced with today." His weathered hands reached for the DNA results. "Very serious indeed." Beside Marion, Evelyn gripped her leather portfolio so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The usually stoic CFO's face betrayed a hint of worry as she watched the board members pass the documents among themselves. "The question before us," said Sarah Chen, head of oncology, "isn't just about one incident. It's about the future of North Star Health." She paused, looking directly at Marion. "And about what kind of leadership we want to represent us." Murmurs rippled through the room. Marion forced herself to breathe slowly, steadily. Through the windows, she could see the candlelight vigil continuing in the hallway, dozens of staff members standing silent witness to whatever would unfold. "Ms. Alvarez," Dr. Thompson said, "your actions this week have been unconventional." He set down the papers and removed his glasses. "You canceled a crucial partnership meeting. You initiated an unauthorized pilot program. You involved yourself in a personal matter that many would consider beyond the scope of your position." Marion's heart sank, but she kept her expression neutral. These were the same arguments she'd been hearing all week. "However," Dr. Thompson continued, surprising her, "you also demonstrated something we desperately need in healthcare leadership: genuine courage in the face of injustice." Sarah Chen nodded. "The Homefront Healing Initiative isn't just about veterans or single parents. It's about recognizing the humanity in our workforce, about creating sustainable solutions instead of quick fixes." "The financial projections Evelyn prepared are quite promising," added James Morrison, adjusting his tie, "especially with the community engagement metrics." One by one, board members began speaking up. They talked about the viral video of Caleb saving the elderly man at the health fair. They mentioned the letters they'd received from staff supporting Marion's leadership. They discussed the potential long-term benefits of a more inclusive hiring model. Evelyn cleared her throat. "If I may?" At Dr. Thompson's nod, she stood and distributed a fresh set of documents. "These are the revised terms from our pharmaceutical partners. They've not only agreed to reinstate the $50 million deal, but have added a specific provision for community care programs and veteran hiring initiatives." A buzz of excitement filled the room. Marion felt her chest tighten with hope, but she didn't dare assume anything yet. "I move that we take this to a vote," Dr. Thompson announced. "Two matters before us. First, the retention of Marion Alvarez as CEO of North Star Health. Second, the full funding and implementation of the Homefront Healing Program." Marion held her breath as hands began to rise. One after another, every board member's arm lifted in support. Even those she'd thought would surely oppose her were nodding their approval. "The vote is unanimous," Dr. Thompson declared, a rare smile crossing his face. "Ms. Alvarez, you will continue as CEO with our full confidence, and Homefront Healing will receive complete funding and support." The tension that had been holding Marion upright for days finally began to dissolve. She felt tears welling in her eyes but couldn't bring herself to care about maintaining her usual professional composure. "Thank you," she managed to say, her voice thick with emotion. "I promise you won't regret this decision." As the board members began gathering their things, offering congratulations and words of support, Evelyn reached over and squeezed Marion's hand. When Marion turned to look at her CFO, she found the usually stern woman smiling warmly, her own eyes suspiciously bright. "You did it," Evelyn whispered. "You really did it." Marion squeezed back, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just happened. Through the windows, she could see the candlelight vigil transforming into a celebration as word spread through the hallways. The future she'd risked everything for was suddenly, amazingly, becoming reality. Caleb Brooks sat in Northstar Hospital's small conference room, his hands clasped tightly in his lap to hide their slight tremor. The morning sun streamed through vertical blinds, casting zebra-striped shadows across the polished table. His crisp white shirt felt stiff against his skin. He'd ironed it 3 times that morning, wanting everything to be perfect. The door opened, and Dr. Sarah Chen, head of emergency services, walked in with a blue folder. Her kind smile immediately put him more at ease. "Mr. Brooks," she said warmly, taking the seat across from him, "thank you for your patience through this whole process." Caleb nodded, his throat too tight for words. The past week had been a whirlwind. From being detained to having his name cleared, from watching Victor Harrington's public confession to seeing Marion's triumphant retention as CEO. "I've reviewed your entire file," Dr. Chen continued, opening the folder. "Your military service record is exemplary. Your handling of the health fair incident showed exceptional skill under pressure, and the letters of recommendation from both our staff and the VA are glowing." She paused, pulling out a smaller envelope. "But what impressed me most was the security footage from that bar incident." Caleb's shoulders tensed slightly. "Ma'am, No, please let me finish." She held up a hand. "What I saw was a trained professional who chose escalation over confrontation, who protected others while keeping his cool, who called for proper help instead of taking matters into his own hands. That's exactly the kind of judgment we need in our EMTs." Relief flooded through Caleb's chest as Dr. Chen slid the envelope across the table. With slightly shaking fingers, he opened it and pulled out a gleaming silver badge. "Congratulations, Mr. Brooks. You're officially recertified as an emergency medical technician." The weight of the badge in his palm felt both familiar and new. He ran his thumb over the raised numbers, remembering all the nights he'd studied after putting Mia to bed, all the practice scenarios he'd run through in his mind. "There's more," Dr. Chen said, pulling out another document. "Marion, Ms. Alvarez, has approved a special position for you. We'd like you to split your time between active EMT duty and serving as outreach coordinator for Homefront Healing. Your experience as both a veteran and a single parent makes you uniquely qualified to help others navigate the program." Caleb looked up, momentarily overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Dr. Chen smiled. "The salary is competitive, benefits include childcare assistance, and your schedule can be arranged around Mia's school hours." He thought of Mia, of her collection of wish stones, and her unwavering belief that good things would come. How many nights had she watched him study, bringing him juice boxes and giving him encouraging pats on the back? "Yes," he said firmly. "Yes, I accept." Dr. Chen stood and extended her hand. "Welcome aboard officially. Your new badge number is 2317. Your locker assignment and uniform details are in the packet. Training starts Monday at 800. Caleb rose and shook her hand, his grip steady now. "Thank you, Dr. Chen. I won't let you down." "I know you won't." She gathered her papers and headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, and there's someone who'd like to see you. She's just outside." The door opened again, and Marion stepped in, wearing a simple blue dress with a small key-shaped pin on the lapel. Her eyes immediately went to the badge in Caleb's hand, and her face lit up. "I had to come congratulate you in person," she said warmly. "This wouldn't have happened without you," Caleb replied. "You took a chance on me when nobody else would." Marion shook her head. "You earned this, Caleb, every step of the way. I just helped clear the path of unnecessary obstacles." She moved closer, looking at the badge. You know, when I saw you in the lobby that first day, protecting Jenny and Nico, I recognized something. Not just the medic tattoo, but the way you handled the situation. The calm strength, the instinct to help. That's not something you can teach. Caleb felt his chest tighten with emotion. My mama used to say that hands remember what they're meant to do. Wise woman. Marion smiled. Speaking of family, I believe you have a very excited little girl waiting to hear some news. Caleb glanced at the clock. Just enough time to pick up Mia from school. He carefully tucked the badge into his shirt pocket, right over his heart. She's been talking about nothing else all week, he said, smiling. Even put her lucky wish, stone under my pillow last night. Those stones of hers seem to work pretty well, Marion said with a wink. Now go on. Go show your daughter what her faith in you helped achieve. Caleb gathered his papers, shook Marion's hand one more time, and headed for the door. In the elevator, he pulled out the badge again, its surface catching the light. His fingers curled around it tightly, feeling its solid weight. The weight of second chances, of dreams renewed, of his daughter's unwavering belief in him. The late afternoon sun filtered through the thin curtains of Jenny's small apartment, casting long shadows across the worn carpet. Jenny sat rigidly at her kitchen table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to keep them from shaking. Across from her, Victor's attorney, Mr. Patterson, methodically arranged a series of documents, his silver-rimmed glasses catching the light. Ms. Santos, he began, in a gentle tone that surprised her. These papers establish a substantial trust fund for Nico. The terms are quite generous. He slid the first document toward her, pointing with his pen. Mr. Harrington has set aside $2 million, which Nico can access for education at 18 and the full amount at 25. Jenny's eyes widened, and she pressed a hand to her mouth. The amount was more than she'd earn in several lifetimes of cleaning hospital rooms. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, Mr. Patterson replied, his voice softer than his press suit would suggest. There's also this. He produced another document. A separate account for immediate needs, housing, education, health care. You'll have full access as Nico's guardian. In the living room, Nico sat cross-legged on the floor with Mia, both children absorbed in a puzzle Caleb had brought over. Their quiet chatter and occasional giggles provided a soundtrack to this surreal moment. Mr. Harrington also insisted on this. The attorney pulled out a formal letter. A written apology and acknowledgement of paternity, legally notarized. No more hiding, Miss Santos. No more pressure to stay quiet. Jenny's hand trembled as she reached for the letter. For 6 years, she'd carried the weight of silence, of sideways glances, of whispered judgments. She'd scrubbed floors and emptied trash bins, while Victor walked the same halls in expensive suits, pretending she was invisible. Take your time, Mr. Patterson said, leaning back. Read everything carefully. Jenny brushed away tears that threatened to fall on the papers. The legal language swam before her eyes, but certain phrases stood out clearly. Hereby acknowledge paternal rights, financial responsibility, formal apology. From the living room, Nico's laugh rang out, clear, unworried, free. The sound strengthened her resolve. She reached for the pen Mr. Patterson offered. Initial here, he guided, and here, full signature on these lines. With each signature, Jenny felt a piece of her burden lift. The pen scratched across paper, transforming 6 years of shame into something else. Dignity, security, truth. Ms. Santos, Mr. Patterson said as she signed the final page, there's one more thing. He produced a business card. Mr. Patterson, Harrington has arranged for a college fund for you as well, should you wish to pursue further education. The hospital's HR department is prepared to accommodate a flexible schedule. Jenny stared at the card, her vision blurring with fresh tears. All those nights she'd dreamed of taking nursing classes, of moving beyond cleaning rooms to caring for patients, dreams she'd tucked away as impossible. Mommy? Nico's voice came from beside her. She hadn't heard him approach. His small hand touched her arm. Why are you crying? Jenny pulled him close, breathing in the clean scent of his hair. Happy tears, Anak. Just happy tears. Mr. Patterson gathered the signed documents into his briefcase. "Everything will be filed today. You'll receive copies by courier tomorrow." He stood, straightening his tie. "Miss Santos, I've handled many cases like this over my career. Few have ended with such grace." After the attorney left, Jenny remained at the table, one hand still touching the business card, the other holding Nico close. The setting sun painted the kitchen walls gold, and for the first time in years, she felt its warmth fully. Nico squirmed in her embrace, looking up with those questioning eyes that saw too much. "Does this mean we can breathe now, Mommy?" The waterfront park sparkled under the crisp morning sun as Marion and Evelyn walked along its winding path. Cherry blossoms dotted the grass like pink confetti, and the gentle breeze carried the sweet scent of spring. Marion pulled her light jacket closer, her silver keypin catching the sunlight. "A community picnic," Evelyn mused, tapping her tablet screen. "Are you sure this isn't too much? Too soon?" Marion smiled, pausing to watch a pair of ducks glide across the calm water. "Sometimes the best way to heal is to celebrate together. After everything that's happened, our hospital family needs this." They found a wooden bench overlooking the water. Evelyn, ever practical, pulled up a spreadsheet. "I've already contacted local restaurants. 3 have offered to donate food, and the hospital cafeteria staff volunteered to make their famous potato salad." "That's wonderful." Marion's eyes lit up. "And what about the activities? The pediatric ward nurses want to set up face painting stations." Evelyn's fingers flew across the screen. "And Dr. Chen suggested organizing relay races for the kids." A young mother jogged past with her stroller, waving at them. Marion waved back, remembering how just weeks ago, this same path had felt heavy with worry. Now it felt like possibility. "We should invite the VA groups too," Marion suggested. "Make it a true community gathering." Evelyn nodded, adding it to her list. Chaplain Ruth already offered to coordinate with them. She thinks some of the veterans might bring their guitars, make it a proper celebration. They spent the next hour planning logistics, where to set up tables, how many volunteers they'd need, what backup plans to make in case of rain. Evelyn's initial hesitation melted away as she caught Marion's enthusiasm. "The church hall offered their chairs and tables," Evelyn said, "and the local printing shop will do the flyers at cost. People really want to help." "That's what community means," Marion replied softly. "When one person stands up, others find their courage too." A group of children ran past, their laughter echoing across the water. One little girl stopped to give them a dandelion. Marion tucked it behind her ear, making the child giggle. Mia and Nico asked if they could organize games, Evelyn mentioned, her voice warm. Something about a stone-skipping contest. Marion's heart swelled. "Perfect. Let them take charge of the children's activities. It'll give them ownership of the celebration." They watched as more families began filling the park, enjoying the beautiful morning. A couple walked their dog, an elderly man fed the ducks, and teenagers practiced skateboard tricks near the path. "We should set up here," Marion gestured to a grassy area near the water. "There's plenty of shade from the trees, and we can put the food tables under that pavilion." Evelyn made notes, then looked up with an unexpected smile. "You know, when you first proposed home front healing, I thought you were letting your heart run away with your head. And now? Now I think maybe we needed both." Evelyn closed her tablet. "The numbers matter, they always will. But so do the stories behind them." The morning grew warmer as they finished their planning. More families arrived at the park, spreading blankets on the grass and unpacking picnic baskets. The scene before them looked like a preview of their upcoming celebration. Back at the hospital entrance, volunteers had already gathered to help create decorations. Nancy from Pediatrics supervised a group folding paper cranes, while Tom from Maintenance sketched layout plans for the tables. "Look at this," Evelyn whispered, gesturing to the busy scene. "They're not just helping, they're investing themselves in it." Children sat cross-legged on the floor, coloring signs for the game stations. "Skip stones for hope," read one in wobbly letters. "Everyone gets a do, over," declared another in rainbow colors. The hospital's usual antiseptic smell mixed with the scent of markers and glue. Laughter echoed through the typically quiet lobby as more volunteers arrived, carrying supplies and offering ideas. "We'll need to make sure there's plenty of seating for our elderly guests," one nurse pointed out, and others quickly chimed in with solutions. "My church has those portable chairs. I can bring extra blankets for the grass. What about some umbrellas for shade?" Marion watched it all, her throat tight with emotion. This was healing of a different kind, not of bodies, but of a community's spirit. The flyers began taking shape as the graphic design team worked their magic. Simple yet elegant. They featured a sunrise over water and the words, "North Star Community Celebration, where every story matters." "Add the stone skipping contest," Mia called out, peering over the designer's shoulder. "And face painting and music." Nico, not to be outdone, suggested, "Can we have a section for people to write their wishes? Like with the do-over stones?" The designer nodded, incorporating their ideas with patient skill. Soon, stacks of flyers were ready for distribution. Volunteers organized into teams, ready to spread the word throughout the neighborhood. Some headed to local businesses, others to community centers and schools. The excitement was contagious. In the hospital cafeteria, the kitchen staff had already started planning their contributions. The head chef proudly showed off his recipe cards, explaining how they'd accommodate various dietary needs. "Everyone should be able to break bread together," he declared, and his team nodded in agreement. By mid-morning, the hospital buzzed with purposeful activity. People who normally just passed each other in hallways now worked side by side, sharing stories and suggestions. "This is more than a picnic," Evelyn observed, watching the scene. "This is community building itself stronger." Marion touched her key pin, thinking of all the doors that had opened and closed to bring them here. "Yes," she agreed. "This is exactly what healing looks like." Children continued crafting decorations, their chatter filling the air with plans for games and activities. Hope didn't just buzz. It sang through the hospital corridors, carried on the wings of paper cranes and the hearts of people coming together to celebrate new beginnings. The waterfront park buzzed with life on Sunday afternoon. Colorful blankets and folding chairs dotted the grass like a patchwork quilt, while red and white checkered tablecloths fluttered on picnic tables. The sweet aroma of grilled hot dogs mixed with the salty breeze off the water. Caleb stood at the large grill, spatula in hand, his new EMT badge gleaming on his belt. The sounds of sizzling meat and cheerful chatter filled the air as he flipped hot dogs with practiced ease. His face, usually serious, now held a gentle smile as he watched Mia and Nico dart through the crowd, chasing iridescent bubbles that floated on the spring breeze. "Daddy, look!" Mia called out, her braids bouncing as she jumped to catch a particularly large bubble. "This one's rainbow-colored." Nico, slightly more reserved but equally excited, followed close behind. "Can I try making some?" he asked, his stutter barely noticeable now. Jenny sat nearby on a blanket, her shoulders relaxed for the first time in years. She chatted easily with other hospital staff members, her housekeeping uniform replaced by a flowery sundress. The weight of secrecy had lifted from her face, leaving her looking younger and more carefree. Veterans in various North Star uniforms mingled with doctors and nurses, their conversations punctuated by occasional bursts of laughter. Some wore badges, identifying them as part of the Homefront Healing Program, while others sported mentor pins. Near the water's edge, a group of former service members had set up a friendly game of volleyball. Evelyn, typically buried in spreadsheets, had traded her usual business attire for casual pants and a light sweater. She moved between groups, making sure everyone had enough food and drinks. Her clipboard was nowhere in sight, replaced by a paper plate piled high with potato salad. "These hot dogs are perfect," a young nurse praised as she picked up her serving. Caleb nodded his thanks, adding another batch to the grill. "Secret's in the timing," he explained, showing a teenage volunteer how to check for the right amount of char. The boy listened intently, clearly inspired by Caleb's patient instruction. Children's laughter rang out as Chaplain Ruth organized a game of red light, green light. Her gray hair caught the sunlight as she called out commands, her warm voice carrying across the grass. Parents watched from their seats, phones ready to capture memories. The hospital's cafeteria staff had outdone themselves. Long tables groaned under the weight of homemade dishes, everything from Mrs. Rodriguez's famous empanadas to Dr. Chen's spring rolls. Paper plates and plastic utensils were replaced by biodegradable alternatives, a touch that showed attention to every detail. Near the dessert table, a group of pediatric nurses had set up face painting stations. A line of excited children waited their turn, each emerging with butterflies, superheroes, or rainbow designs decorating their cheeks. The nurses' skilled hands, usually occupied with medical equipment, now wielded paintbrushes with surprising artistry. Music drifted from portable speakers, a carefully curated playlist that included everything from gentle jazz to upbeat pop songs. Some couples had carved out a small dancing area, swaying to the rhythm while others clapped along. The bubble machine whirred steadily, sending streams of shimmering spheres into the air. Mia and Nico had recruited other children into their chase, creating a joyful parade that weaved between picnic blankets and chairs. Their laughter was infectious, drawing smiles from even the most reserved attendees. "You need a break?" Jenny approached Caleb at the grill, holding out a cold drink. "I can watch this for a while." Caleb shook his head, but accepted the beverage gratefully. "I'm good. Something peaceful about this, you know?" She nodded, understanding. In the distance, Mia was teaching Nico how to make bigger bubbles by moving the wand slower through the air. Their concentration was identical. Tongues stuck out slightly. Eyes focused intently on their task. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the grass as Marion walked through the crowd. She stopped frequently to chat, her presence welcomed rather than feared. Her usual power suits were replaced by comfortable slacks and a light blouse, the small key pin still faithfully attached to her collar. She paused to watch a veteran teaching a group of children how to make paper airplanes, their small hands carefully following his instructions. Nearby, a former combat medic demonstrated proper bandaging technique to interested onlookers, his movements confident and precise. This was more than a picnic. It was a community coming together, healing old wounds and building new connections. Hospital hierarchies had dissolved for the day, replaced by genuine human interaction. Doctors sat with maintenance staff, sharing stories and food. Administrative assistants taught senior executives the right way to roast marshmallows. The success of Homefront Healing was evident in more than just statistics. It showed in the way veteran employees carried themselves with pride, in how single parents could work knowing their children were safe and cared for. It showed in the easy smiles and relaxed postures of people who had found their place. Marion made her way to the grill, accepting a hot dog from Caleb with a warm smile. She surveyed the scene before her. The playing children, the mingling adults, the sense of belonging that seemed to envelope everyone present. The hospital's corporate politics and budget meetings felt distant now, replaced by something far more valuable. This was what she had dreamed of when she first took the CEO position, not just running a successful hospital, but creating a true community. The kind of place where a former Army medic could rebuild his life, where a housekeeper's son could play freely without fear, where healing happened in more ways than one. Her heart swelled as she watched Mia and Nico run past, their faces glowing with joy. They paused their game to share their bubble solution with younger children, demonstrating the same spirit of generosity that had brought everyone here today. The late afternoon sun painted the sky in soft oranges and pinks, reflecting off the water and casting a gentle glow over the gathering. Laughter and conversation continued to fill the air, creating a symphony of community and connection that echoed across the park. Golden light spilled across the waterfront as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in warm hues of orange and pink. The afternoon's festivities had settled into a gentle quiet, with families gathered on blankets and children's laughter carrying on the breeze. Chaplain Ruth stood near the water's edge, her silver hair catching the evening light. She smoothed her simple navy dress and watched as people naturally began gravitating toward her, drawn by the peaceful presence she always carried. "Let's gather together," she called softly, her voice carrying just enough to reach those nearby. Word spread through the crowd like ripples on water, and soon the entire group moved closer, forming a loose circle near the shore. Marion stepped forward, her usual CEO polish softened by the casual sweater she wore. She stood between Evelyn and Jenny, their shoulders nearly touching. Evelyn had traded her business suit for jeans, looking more relaxed than anyone had seen her in months. Jenny held Nico's hand, her other arm draped around his shoulders. The boy leaned against his mother, tired from an afternoon of play, but content in a way that made her heart ache with gratitude. He wore the new sneakers that had arrived yesterday, his first gift from the trust fund Victor had established. Caleb joined them, still wearing the apron from his grilling duties. Mia bounced at his side, clutching her favorite wish stone in one small fist. She'd spent the afternoon teaching other children how to pick the smoothest stones for wishes, her expertise shared with solemn authority. The setting sun cast long shadows across their faces as Chaplain Ruth raised her hands in a gentle gesture of welcome. "What a beautiful gathering," she began, her voice warm and steady. "Would you join me in a prayer of thanksgiving?" Heads bowed naturally, even those who weren't regular churchgoers feeling the weight of the moment. The only sounds were the gentle lap of water against the shore and the distant call of seabirds. "Dear Lord," Ruth began, "we gather here in gratitude for second chances, for doors that open when others close, for courage that rises when fear threatens to overwhelm." A soft breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of water and late summer flowers. Marian felt tears prick at her eyes as she remembered the chapel where Ruth had counseled her in her darkest moment. "We thank you for healing that comes in unexpected ways," Ruth continued. "For Caleb's steady hands that save lives, for Jenny's brave heart that protected her son, for Marian's wisdom that chose justice over ease." Caleb squeezed Mia's shoulder gently. His new EMT badge caught the fading sunlight where it hung from his belt, a testament to perseverance and redemption. "We give thanks for children who teach us about fresh starts." Ruth's voice softened as she glanced at Mia and Nico. "Who remind us that every stone can carry a wish, and every day holds the possibility of renewal." Jenny wiped a tear from her cheek, remembering the weight that had lifted when truth finally prevailed. Nico pressed closer to her side, secure in the knowledge that he no longer had to hide who he was. "We're grateful for this community," Ruth went on. "For those who stood in hallways with candles, who believed in the power of doing the next right thing, who refused to let fear have the final word." Evelyn reached for Marian's hand and squeezed it, remembering their late-night strategy sessions and the moment they'd chosen principle over profit. "And Lord, we ask for your continued guidance as we move forward. Bless this Homefront Healing program. Bless the veterans and parents who will find new purpose here. Bless the children who will grow up knowing that second chances are always possible." The sun touched the horizon now, sending streamers of light across the water. The group stood in peaceful silence, united by shared struggles and collective hope. "Finally, we thank you for bringing us together on this shore," Ruth's voice grew tender, "for reminding us that healing happens in community, that burdens shared become lighter, that grace shows up in the most unexpected moments." She paused, letting the words settle like a blessing. "In gratitude and hope, we pray. Amen." "Amen," the group echoed softly. As heads lifted, Mia tugged at her father's hand. "Can I do it now, Daddy?" Caleb nodded, and everyone watched as the little girl approached the water's edge. She held up her chosen stone, smooth and gray, with a single white stripe running through it. Standing at the very edge where water met land, Mia closed her eyes. Her voice carried clearly in the evening quiet. "For everyone who needs a do-over," with perfect 7-year-old solemnity, she tossed the stone into the water. It arced through the golden light and disappeared beneath the surface with a gentle plop, sending ripples outward in ever-widening circles. The setting sun cast long shadows across the waterfront park as day surrendered to dusk. A gentle breeze carried the sweet scent of late summer flowers and distant barbecue smoke. Marian stood before the small mirror in her portable office, really just a converted food truck they'd used for the health fair, and carefully pinned a small silver key to her navy blazer's lapel. Her fingers trembled slightly as she adjusted it. The key wasn't fancy, just a simple symbol she'd found in her mother's old jewelry box, but its meaning ran deep, like roots seeking water through soil. It represented every door that should have stayed locked but didn't, every barrier that needed breaking, every path that required clearing. "It suits you," Evelyn said from the doorway, her usual sharp business attire softened by a casual sweater. "Your mother would be proud." Marian touched the key gently. "I hope so. She taught me that doors aren't just for keeping people out. They're for welcoming people in." Outside, the community picnic was winding down in the sweetest way possible. Children darted between blankets spread on the grass, their energy somehow still boundless after a full day of play. Parents chatted in small groups, paper plates balanced on laps, sharing stories and phone numbers and promises to stay in touch. Near the water's edge, Caleb knelt on one knee, his new EMT badge catching the golden light. Mia bounced on her toes beside him, her small fingers reaching out to touch the shiny surface. "Can I wear it, Daddy?" she asked, eyes wide with wonder. Caleb's laugh was rich and free, a sound that had been too rare these past years. "Not yet, baby girl. But maybe someday you'll earn your own." "I will," Mia declared with absolute certainty. "I'm going to help people just like you do." Jenny stood nearby, watching the scene with soft eyes. Her hand was clasped firmly in Nico's, who had finally stopped hiding behind her skirts. The boy's shoulders were straighter now, his chin held higher. The weight of secrecy had lifted from both mother and son, leaving room for hope to grow. Marian made her way down to join them, her heels sinking slightly in the grass. Hospital staff and community members nodded as she passed, offering warm smiles rather than the nervous deference she'd grown used to. This was better. This felt real. "Ms. Alvarez," Nico called out when he spotted her, waving with his free hand. "Look what Mia gave me." He held up a smooth gray stone, perfectly sized for skipping across water. "Another wish stone?" Marian asked, remembering Mia's collection. "Uh-huh. But this one's special." He looked at Mia, who nodded encouragement. "It's not for wishing anymore. It's for remembering that wishes come true." Chaplain Ruth approached their small group, her practical shoes making no sound on the grass. Her weathered face held the kind of peace that came from years of watching hope win out over hardship. "Shall we have our prayer?" she asked, though it wasn't really a question. Even those who didn't usually pray felt the rightness of marking this moment. They formed a loose circle: Marian, Caleb, Jenny, the children, Evelyn, and a few others who had drifted over. The setting sun painted them all in the same warm light, erasing titles and distinctions. "Dear Lord," Ruth began, her voice carrying clearly in the evening air, "we thank you for second chances, for doors that open when we least expect them, for courage that rises when we need it most." Mia slipped her hand into Caleb's large one. Nico pressed closer to Jenny's side. "We thank you for healing that goes deeper than medicine," Ruth continued. "For community that grows stronger through trials, for truth that sets us free, even when it costs us dearly." Marian felt tears prick at her eyes but didn't try to hide them. Her hand found the key pin, touching it like a talisman. "And most of all, Lord, we thank you for hope. The kind that builds bridges between hearts. The kind that turns strangers into family. The kind that reminds us we're never truly alone." The prayer ended softly, like a gentle wave reaching shore. For a moment, no one moved. The only sound was the lap of water against the pier and distant seabirds calling their evening songs. Then Mia tugged on Caleb's hand. "Daddy, can we walk to the end of the pier? I want to show Nico how to skip stones properly." "Please, Mom?" Nico looked up at Jenny with newfound confidence. Jenny smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Of course, mi amor, but stay where we can see you." "Would you all join us?" Caleb asked, looking at Marian and the others. "Seems right to end the day together." Marian nodded, feeling the weight of her key pin, light as it was, reminding her of promises kept and bridges built. "I'd like that very much." The small group began moving toward the pier, their steps falling into an easy rhythm. Mia and Nico ran ahead, their excited chatter carrying back to the adults. Evelyn fell into step beside Jenny, asking about Nico's upcoming school year. Chaplain Ruth walked with Caleb, listening as he shared his plans for the EMT program. Marian brought up the rear, watching them all. The sky had deepened to purple and rose, stars beginning to peek through like distant promises. She touched her key pin one last time, and whispered a final, private prayer of gratitude. The sound of laughter echoed across the water. Mia had just taught Nico how to make a stone skip 3 times. The children's joy was infectious, spreading through the group like ripples from those skipping stones. Here was proof that sometimes the best endings were really new beginnings in disguise. They walked on together, their shadows stretching long behind them, while ahead the pier led them forward into the gathering dusk. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Marian Alvarez, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.